I'm a photophysical chemist, and so that's just somebody that studies light interaction with matter.
You are listening to Service Course by the Cycling Podcast.
We call it the sweat and hot plate method. It's a method developed by the Hohenstein Institute.
37.5 Technologies is all about this volcanic sand.
With Lizzy Banks and Tom Whalley.
Well, Lizzy, where are we?
Well, you guys will be glad to know that Tom is doing an official shedcast this week, because last month he said he was doing a shedcast, but it was actually an attic cast. But this time he's in his glorious shed and he's given me the tour, full tour.
The tour does not take very long. Yeah, I'm doing it. If any of you have ever seen my short-lived YouTube series, The Shedcast, the Cycling Shedcast, I'm back in the shed because, well, we're both in delightful isolation, aren't we?
Yeah, we're doing the responsible thing. We're staying at home and, yeah, just keeping ourselves away from other people and doing a bit of social distancing.
It might sound a bit odd where I am in the shed because although I do work down here, it's not very well insulated, so you can hear the odd wood pigeon and a dog barking in the background. But hopefully that's a bit of the outside brought to you guys who are stuck indoors. Lizzy, how are you coping with this this just period of uncertainty? You know, as an athlete, how are you coping with it?
I'm actually pretty relaxed about it, to be honest. At the point when our races were cancelled, I have to say the first thing I felt was probably relief, because I was really feeling pretty irresponsible about going to these races. But it's really difficult when you don't really have a choice. You know, the races are still going on, and it was the governing body and the government's responsibilities to tell us not to go. And so at the point that it was, they said everything's cancelled, I thought, thank goodness, because that's the right thing to do. Of course I want to race. You know, I'm in the best form I've been in ever. And I worked really hard for this. I was preparing to try and get selected for the Olympics as well, which has now kind of officially been postponed. But it was the right thing to do. This whole situation is so much bigger than bike racing. And it was absolutely the responsible thing to do.
Well, last time I saw you were finishing 6th at Omloop and looking very deep in the pain cave. You must be, I think racing paused pretty much after that. You must be quite high on the UCI rankings at the moment.
Yeah, I actually have to say I'm probably one of the only people that's actually done 5 days of racing this year, apart from the people who were racing down under in Australia. But there's a fair number of people who won't have done a race yet. Their first race was going to be Strade Bianche, the first Women's World Tour race in the women's peloton. And yeah, I've actually managed to get 5 race days in, so not bad.
So, I mean, we will move on with the podcast, but obviously we haven't spoken since the last podcast, really. What does the situation look for you look like for you in terms of training and stuff like that then?
Well, at the moment, I've actually had a few days off the bike because I had a little bit of a gripey knee. And seeing as the races were cancelled for the foreseeable future, I was kind of in the predicament, should I train, should I rest it, not quite sure what to do. Whereas now we had a clear message that our races weren't going to be happening for a certain period of time. So I thought, right, this is a good opportunity to rest my injury, give my body the time it needs to heal. So I've just been doing things around the house that needed doing. I laid a carpet in the living room. I've got some material that I'm going to make curtains with. Just bits and bobs that needed doing. I've started baking a lot more. It's something that I really like doing, but often you just don't find you have time. So yeah, I've been busy doing lots of things and sent letters around to elderly neighbours locally who, you'll be surprised how many people right on your doorstep need help and need support. So yeah, I'm managing to keep myself busy, helping myself and my family and helping others, delivering food and things when needed.
Well, athletes doing very mundane things is my new jam. I'm really into it. So you laying carpets, that ranks quite highly. I'm into it a lot. Well, listen, service course continues as usual. We are going to try and be as virus-free a zone as possible, both literally and figuratively. What's in this month's episode, Lizzy?
Well, we've got some volcanic sand coming later in the podcast. We always like to have something that's a little bit left field for you. We're hearing from my clothing sponsor, Katusha. We're also hearing from the leaders in bad weather gear, Gore Wear. But first of all, we're going to hear from Rapha and the designers of probably some of the coolest kits in the peloton behind the big Katusha kit.
Yeah, that's right. This episode is all about clothing, if you hadn't guessed it by now. And we're looking at new stuff. And one of my favourite kits, one of the few kits out there that looks as though it's actually designed for cycling fans to buy and wear, is the Canyon SRAM kit. Sadly, we haven't seen that much of it this year for obvious reasons, but it has had an update, and I spoke to the designer Angelo Trofa about it. And before we start, his accent is definitely not what you'd expect from someone called Angelo Trofa.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of, working for Rapha, I mean, I remember the first time I saw the first Canyon kit, and it was probably the coolest team kit in sport, I'd say. It was way ahead of, you see what football kits have become now. They at that time, they were all quite toned down and quite classic looking, whereas that was just out there, and it projected a personality on the team that was amazing. So I guess it gave license to build on that.
Lizzy, you've got a new kit this year, and it's pretty stunning. Again, it's a shame we've not seen more of it. Are there unmeasurable effects that a kit can have, like making you feel more confident or giving a team an identity?
Yeah, definitely. Your kit is your identity. You see a kit, you relate it to this family of bike riders, and yeah, your teammates are your family, and it's your uniform. It's something that you wear every day, and having that uniform, owning that uniform, being part of that team can make you feel really, really good.
Well, this is something I spoke to Angelo about.
If you speak to athletes and athletes in different sports, and they'll often talk about the uniform. I mean, not all of them, but you've heard it mentioned before, where if they're feeling confident in what they're wearing, they feel like it increases their performance. So I think it's definitely there's something definitely psychological there. I mean, if you rock up and you've got like a mundane kit and you see somebody looking out there and insane, I guess it's gonna, it'll catch your attention. I don't know whether it'll make you feel more or less underconfident, but it'll definitely make the other guys look like they're on it.
So, Lizzy, what about the psychological effect of kit on performance? Does it have, can it change the way you perform?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the best example in the women's peloton is Boels Dolmans. Okay, it's not the best looking kit out there. It's orange, and it's not something that you would buy because you want to look really fashionable. But having said that, it probably has the biggest psychological effect of any kit in the peloton, other than perhaps the rainbow stripes, which are at the moment in Mitchelton Scott in the women's peloton. So I mean, if you take, say, a domestic rider and who no one would fear on the domestic scene, and you put her in a Boels Dolmans jersey, and then you put her in a World Tour field, everybody would fear her because they know that power of Boels Dolmans. And so it's really about having the right mental attitude, and without that mental attitude, you're not going to be able to beat these people. Everybody is beatable. But you've got to have the right attitude. You've got to say, I can beat them. You've got to think beyond the colour of the jersey, beyond the rainbow stripes. And that's when you get to the point where you can win no matter what.
It's interesting. You have worn quite a few different kits in your short career so far. Have you noticed that people react to you differently depending on what you're racing in? Are you allowed, say, more leeway to get in a break if you're wearing a certain jersey?
Yeah, definitely. I think also what's really noticeable is when your team does something spectacular, the response in the next race to your jersey, and not just to you, to all members of your team. So, for instance, our first race of this year was in Spain, and we had a pretty phenomenal team performance there, and people saw that. And so when we came to Omloop, we sent the message that we were a force to be reckoned with. And suddenly people give you the space in the peloton. Yeah, they don't just open the door for you, but they give you respect in a way that maybe before, they'd have said, F off, I'm not letting you in.
Well, I don't know about the psychological effect that the Canyon SRAM kit has had, but it is one of the coolest kits out there. So how do you approach redesigning an already iconic kit?
Probably most nervous I've been with approaching a project. Like with EF last year, the year before when we started designing that first one, it's almost like there was carte blanche. So there was almost like nothing that we were trying to live up to. Whereas with Canyon, especially like their last 2 team kits, they've been so out there, and to me, the first one in particular is so iconic, where it's almost like, how the hell how do we begin to try and live up to that? Because obviously, you always want the next kit to be the best one. So I guess that was definitely the starting point, trying to build on that and not lose any of the impact that it has when you see the riders wearing it. Lara, who was dealing with the pro teams here at Rapha, she mentioned doing a workshop with the team, which kind of jumped at it, because I guess I'd never really met them or hung out with them or anything. So it was quite interesting going over there, and we prepared a lot of questions that we wanted to ask them, like specific things, what they liked about the current kit, what they didn't like, what they thought worked, how they wanted to be perceived. Because I guess, especially since I've been here, when designing the women's 100 kits, there's that conversation where it's like, is it feminine? Should we be designing something that feels feminine? So even asking the riders how they wanted to be perceived when they rocked up. I think one of the questions was on the scale of, feminine to aggressive, where do you want to sit on that scale? And the answer was kind of neither. They just wanted to look like they rocked up and mean business. To them putting on the kit, they were talking about, gaining some power through putting on the kit. And one of the things that they said they really loved about the existing design was that the different colours. I mean, it was quite interesting. We ended up on quite a spiritual journey with the conversation. They were talking about seeing each other as different colours, and that was definitely something that we used, because we knew from then that we needed to retain the colours in the design, and that's what made it unique. But how did we dial that up? Because one of the comments was on the kit from the season before, was that on one of the shoulders it was quite dark, so they couldn't find each other when looking for each other, because that shoulder was so it was like dark reds and navies, if I remember right. So we knew that we had to make both shoulders pink, which is why one of the shoulders ended up becoming white and the other one is red, I think, if it's off the top of my head. Too many colours.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, cycling podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
That's Seb PK, the voice of race radio at the Tour de France, interrupting to remind me to tell you that this episode of Service Course is sponsored by The Economist magazine. The Economist is about far more than just economics and finance. It covers a range of subjects from world politics and business to science, technology, arts and the environment. It helps readers prepare for what is going on in the world around them. Boy, isn't there a lot. The Economist sifts through the noise, focusing on the essential information that tells the real story in a time when facts matter more than ever. And I don't think that is an understatement at all. It has been a trusted source of intelligence for over 170 years. The Economist is the smart guide to the forces impacting your world, and now is the time to subscribe, as you can get your first 12 issues for just £12. For £12, you'll get 12 print issues delivered to your door, a fantastic digital offering, including full access to economist.com with exclusive web-only content, and the new app so you can read or listen to current and previous editions of The Economist, and much, much more. I've been flicking through my copy and a bunch of articles really caught my eye, but the one I enjoyed the most was about the conversation. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was Francis Ford Coppola movie, and they peg it as his half-forgotten masterpiece. It's a film that I refer to quite a lot, actually, as an audio producer. It is one of the most beautifully sound-designed films of all time, and I often reference Gene Hackman in it, because he's often trying to enhance barely audible bits of audio. When I've got a tricky edit on the cycling podcast, I often reference and compare myself to Gene Hackman. I didn't realise, actually, from the article, I didn't know that it lost out on the Oscar to The Godfather Part 2, another great film, and also by Francis Ford Coppola. And in these times when we're going to be spending a lot of time indoors at home, it's given me motivation to rewatch it and a bunch of other films from that period, because I really do love that sort of paranoid 70s thriller period. For your 12 weeks access to The Economist for just £12, just text CP12, that's CP12, all one word, to 78070. That's the letters CP and then the number 12, all one word, to 78070 for your first 12 weeks access, and enjoy The Economist whenever and wherever you want. Well, shall we talk about another cool kit out there, Lizzie?
Is it mine?
It's yours, yeah, absolutely. I honestly, no, I'm not saying this just because we're chatting. I do think the redesign of the Bigler Katusha kit, or not even the redesign, the first iteration of the Bigler Katusha kit is stunning. I really like it.
Yeah, I really like it, and the thing that makes me really happy is that it's something that I want to wear and I feel really proud to put on when I wear it, and it just makes you feel good. It really makes you feel good, and the fit is so good. I just put it on and I feel happy. And I've got some really, really cool summer kit, and I can't wait for the weather to warm up so I can get it on and get out in it. And yeah, just ride around and feel great, because that's the main thing. It was really quite a different experience this year, because it's the first year with Katusha that I've ever had a custom fitted clothing. So we all flew into Geneva and the seamstresses came in, and it was such a cool experience. But it's such a huge task for any clothing company to fit a pro team. I mean, in our women's team, we only actually have 13 riders, but a men's team might have over 30 riders. Then you're always going to have a couple of directors and, team owners who want the kit. And then Katusha said to me that when they were sponsoring Katusha Alpecin, they had over 100 staff who needed casual clothing that they had to fit out as well. So I actually spoke with Marie Cortal from Katusha when I was back at training camp a couple of months ago, and I asked her, how do you actually go about fitting a pro rider? We all come in different shapes and sizes, and we're all so picky about our clothing.
First thing, we work on the kit assortment, meaning that we define the number of different models that the rider needs in order to race and train properly during the season. Then we work on the development of those products by selecting the correct fabric, making the proper constructions and all that kind of things. And then when our prototypes are ready, we develop them in all different sizes, standard sizes, and those standard sizes, we fit them one by one on every rider to adjust all the measurements that needs to be adjusted. Because knowing that within one team you can have sprinter, which will be usually quite tall and quite massive, and at the same time you have a climber which is small and thin. The products have to fit everybody, and we have to make sure that everyone will feel comfortable and that the garments will be perfectly adjusted on them. So that's why we spend a lot of time to check all of that and to make all the necessary adjustments for each single rider, which means that within a team, each people has its own model of jersey or bib short, and they cannot swap one jersey from guy to the other because they are all made sur mesure. On the women team, we are super proud to have this new team with those great girls with whom we are able to work now, because as we did it for men, we believe that pro cycling is the best possible testing lab to create, first to imagine, and then to develop and create our products. So that will be a super nice opportunity to discuss with all the riders, have them tested our new products, have them giving us some feedback on what they are using, what they miss, what they would like to have, what is working, what is not working. That's a super nice opportunity to make sure that we will have the best possible products.
So testing is actually something that I'm doing for Katusha's winter products for next season at the moment. you know, I'm someone who spends so many hours in the saddle, and I have such high standards for the best possible comfort and durability that it makes perfect sense for someone like me to test it. You know, I've used so many different types of kit over the years. I know exactly what works. I know exactly what doesn't work, more importantly. And so why not get somebody like me to give the feedback and make the kit the best it can possibly be?
One thing that's always got me riding is you know it, I'm a fair weather cyclist these days. I always have been. I've always hated riding and racing in the rain, and I don't think I have ever used any wet weather gear that I have felt is worthy of the name, to be honest. I just find that it all lets me down.
Well, you need to listen to what we've got coming up in the podcast then, Tom, because I've got some really good wet weather gear coming up for you. I mean, I do spend a lot of time riding in the rain, not because I want to, but because I live in a rain shadow in Sheffield, and then I ride into the Peak District, and even though BBC Weather likes to tell me it's dry, it's usually throwing it down. So my motto is to never leave the house without a rain jacket, and it's not just because it could rain, you know, anything else could happen. You could crash, you could get a puncture, and say you've been doing an effort, you know, if there's wind, you get chilled so fast. I mean, I've had some pretty bad experiences about riding in the rain as well. I was actually going to discuss with you here about our worst experiences of riding in the rain, but maybe you don't have any because you never ride in the rain.
Do you know what? I'll tell you my worst experience. It was a couple of seasons ago, first weekend of the season, the sort of the amateur season in here. You might have done this race. There's an opening set of races. There's Eddie Sowens on the Saturday, then it's followed on the Sunday by a couple of races at Pimbo on the industrial estate.
Yeah, I
don't
did
know
that.
if you've done that one.
Yeah, I did that, and when I was there, it was throwing it down. It was biblical.
Yes.
Absolutely biblical.
So I wonder if that was the same year. This is probably about 2016 or 2017. It was about 3 degrees, but it felt like -1 with the wet. And they were actually pulling riders out of the race because they didn't have gloves on and they just weren't safe to ride. And I think I had all my clothes on racing, and I still was absolutely frozen. And it was the second time. There's 2 races where I've ended up in a space blanket afterwards, and that was one of them. The other one was, so I remember having I could remember someone's words in my ear that said, you know, race as though look as though you're ready to race, and by that I meant just strip your clothes off, you know, get your legs out no matter what the weather, right? And and this was a race up here in the northwest, I think, the Frank Morgan, I think it's called, Memorial, and it hailed about 3 or 4 times during the race, and just by the end, honestly, by about 3/4 through, I was just done. I was in my just skin suit, hands out, legs out, and it took me about half an hour to get out of the car in the end. I was so cold.
I was at that race at Pimbo. It was 2017. It was my first race of 2017 with Sunsport Velo. Our race was actually shortened because the weather was so bad, but they didn't shorten the men's. Classic, women can't cope, men can, of course. And
I self-shortened by pulling out.
That was probably a good idea. Yeah, I was so cold that I was changing gear with, you know, my wrist because I couldn't do it with my fingers. But I mean, I've had so many experiences like that, and often it is bad clothing choices. People say, this is actually one of my pet peeves, people say there's no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing. That is not true. You've not ridden in really bad weather if you say that. There is such thing as bad weather, but there is also such a thing as good clothing. Now, a few years ago, Gore Wear released their Shake Dry jacket, and I think it kind of revolutionised the rain jacket market at that time. There'd been so many boil in the bag type jackets. You guys will know what I'm talking about. So having a new era of something which promised not to be a boil in the bag was super exciting. I spoke with Anne Weir from Gore Technology, who is an applications engineer in textiles. And she specialises in high aerobic sports, so things like running and cycling. And she told me the nitty-gritty about how the Gore Shake Dry is actually made.
So our Gore Shake Dry is actually multi-layers of EPTFE. So our actual membrane is made up of 3 layers, which you wouldn't actually see or feel, because it's so microporous. So there's the EPTFE layer, which is multifunctional, and there's a layer of textile, super lightweight, 15 denier textile, which the membrane is laminated to. So in essence, it's actually almost like 4 layers if you looked at it very, very finely under a microscope.
So do you know what PTFE is?
No. Before we actually get on to what I know and how little I know, I've just got to apologise. Because people are in self-isolation at the moment, they've decided that it's an ideal time to mow the lawn. So if you can hear a bit of a lawnmower in the background, there's nothing I could do about it. I'm in isolation in the shed.
Well, maybe you can also hear people frying their bacon. And if so, that would be very apt, because PTFE is actually the same stuff as Teflon. So it's what you put on frying pans. It's also the same stuff that comes in a white tape that you might put around your radiator to the radiator valves to stop them leaking when you fit your radiators. Well, EPTFE is that, but it's expanded.
So it's expanded polytetrafluoroethylene. Breathability is, in its definition, is the ability of a fabric to allow moisture vapor or sweat vapor from the body to escape through its microporous structure or through its structure. In actual fact, our shake dry technology has a very low, very, very low resistance and allows so much moisture to escape through its system. And it feels different from a textile because you're not getting an air circulation. But in actual fact, our Gore Shake Dry at times could even be more breathable than something that's just a textile. So if you take a thicker textile and you measure this, we call it the sweat and hot plate method. It's a method developed by the Hohenstein Institute. When we measure the resistance of the material up to allow moisture to escape, it has a very, very low resistance, meaning it allows a lot of moisture vapor to come through its structure. And it's very dependent on the thickness of the material as well. So if it's a thick material, which some base layers are, it takes quite a lot of energy and quite a lot of time for moisture to get through that surface. Whereas the shake dry, it's a purely microporous structure. If you think of it like a second skin, there's so many microporous structures there, and it's so thin that moisture's escaping almost like fresh air.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, cycling podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
That's old Seb PK once again, reminding me to tell you that this episode of Service Course is sponsored by Harry's. Now, Jeff and Andy are 2 ordinary guys who were fed up with overpriced razors, so they decided to do something about it, and they started Harry's. They realised there was only one way to ensure quality, so they bought their own factory, and by taking less profit, Harry's offers great quality products for a fair price, and their amazing quality blades are almost half the price of the leading 5-blade brand. Now, despite being on lockdown or in self-isolation or whatever situation you find yourself in, I don't think that's any excuse to let yourself go. You've got to look good on those Zoom conference calls, of course. Now, not having to see people has given me the chance to experiment with a bit of facial hair. I'm currently rocking a Van Dyke, I think it's called, and I've been using my Harry's razors to keep that in check. Now, I love the feel of the razors, and it is genuinely the best shave I've had. And obviously, we're a podcast all about technology and design, so it's no coincidence that the weighted ergonomic handle really, really appeals to me. Even better than that, though, you can set up a subscription like I have so that the blades are delivered to your door as frequently as you need them. That means you'll never run out of blades and there's no need to go to the shops, meaning you can keep up your social distancing. You can get started shaving with Harry's today by claiming a trial set for just $3.95. Support our podcast, get your trial set delivered to you, including that weighted ergonomic razor handle, 5-blade cartridge, foaming shave gel and travel blade cover by going to harrys.com/cycling right now. That's harrys.com/cycling. I think we have discovered during the course of this that I am an idiot when it comes to clothing. And one of the things I've also never been able to do is I've never been able, no matter what I've used, I've never been able to keep my feet to a level of dryness and warmth that means I can still compete when it's wet and cold.
Okay, well, first I'm going to give you a pro hack, and then I'm going to give you a top tip to buy. So my pro hack is get some electrical tape and cover the holes in your shoes. And it's such a simple thing. It's pretty much free. Who hasn't got electrical tape in their house? Cover the holes on the bottom of your shoes, cover the air holes on the top. It'll keep your feet warm and it'll stop that water getting in from below, because otherwise, as soon as you have that spray on your road, it comes from the front wheel and it goes straight in through your toes. The next thing is Spatswear. I've not actually used these myself, but they are really long, kind of like over socks, but over shoes, and they come right the way up your calves, and everybody who uses them has sworn by them, saying that it's the first time their feet have actually stayed dry. So that's definitely something to give a go. But it's funny thinking about kind of textiles and technology and what's an evolution and what's a revolution. And I think back to my days when I was younger and we used to go walking in the Lake District and we used to get so wet in these boil in the bag, you know, waterproof supposedly trousers and waterproof supposedly tops. And I remember when Gore-Tex material started first coming into waterproof jackets, and we bought some of these and they were pretty expensive at the time, but they were such a good investment and it completely changed our experience of walking holidays. So I asked Anne, how on earth does she stay ahead of the game, and how do they stay a market leader? Is it about evolution or is it about revolution? Do you think there is a place to apply a similar technology that, you know, from the shape dry to items like bib tights, for example?
We definitely have intent to try and realise that need of the consumer. So we're always looking at problems to solve, and that is definitely one area that we are exploring. We have some challenges, some technical challenges that would make it available and commercial. I'm not sure how expensive you would want to make something, but yeah, it's definitely something that is being explored. Whether we can make something commercial is another kind of question that we need to answer. But yeah, I'd love to see something. Maybe the kind of look and that kind of shinier surface is something that is a bit unique, would be quite niche perhaps. So we often look at things in terms of their size of the opportunity, and sometimes we know we can solve problems, but are they the biggest challenges or the biggest problems to solve? And we have to kind of then prioritise. But yeah, hopefully we will continue to bring technologies into the market that improves the rider's experience. That's always what we're looking to do. The shake dry in an overshoe, at this moment in time, that technology would maybe not be quite so robust enough from a surface perspective, so you probably get quite a lot of abrasion on the surface of a shoe or an overshoe. So in its current form, it wouldn't be too relevant. But yeah, more to come. So I guess Gore-Tex originally was it was a revolution. So it was brand new, the first waterproof and breathable material on the market, which was patented for, I think it was 20 years. I think we're always evolving. We have different teams in Gore, Some are looking at real blue sky technologies, probably even new product forms for lots of different end uses. The area that I work in is a little bit closer to the market, so it tends to be things that we can dial, sort of changing the dial, so it's not extreme changes, but we've got lots and lots always on the go. We've always got too many things in our pipeline of dreams, and always lots of problems to solve. I think one of our big challenges at the minute, where we've focused a lot as a company, is around sustainability and ensuring that we continue to be at the forefront of producing products with the right intent, but also producing products that are built to last, and that's still our key goal. As Gore Associates, I think we always dream to bring out the next best thing. So I was personally involved in the shake dry development, and when you see it in the market and you hear the feedback, you definitely get energized to continue to work to make improvements. And I think it's a balance, right, of bringing things that evolve in a way that's sustainable, but bringing a revolutionary product is also something that we like to do. So yeah, I know quite a lot, but I can't tell you. Sorry. and a lot gets worked on that we don't bring to market. Obviously, we only bring the things that we really believe in, and there's opportunity for us to improve people's lives. That's our goal and our vision as a business and a company.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport. Fueled by science.
Well, my name's Chris Hoy. I'm a 6-time Olympic gold medalist and an 11-time world champion. 92, it was very basic indeed. Basically maltodextrin, using carbohydrate mixed up with water. That was your fuel source for endurance rides and for sort of recovery after our sessions. Protein for sprinters, so the endurance riders wouldn't use protein because they thought that if you had a scoop of protein you were going to get muscles like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But then creatine came out. So 1992 creatine came out. That was a new super wonder product, again for power athletes as opposed to endurance athletes. And Science and Sport were one of the first companies to produce this creatine monohydrate. So yeah, it was expensive. It was about 20 quid a tub back then, and that, as a student, that was a lot of money. But we decided, well, this is a product worth using. So Science and Sport has been a company I've used, I've trusted since then, and even in my retirement now, I still use their products. And yeah, I think when you become an ambassador for a company, you only do it if you truly believe in what the company stands for and the products, and yeah, I certainly do with Science and Sport.
Thanks as always to Science and Sport for their continued sponsorship of the Cycling Podcast and all that we do here. If you want to get 25% off your next order with Science and Sport, then simply go to the website and enter the offer code SISCP25. That's SISCP25. One thing I love about doing this show is the amazing job titles that we get. The other week I threw at you a guy whose business card said member of the board of directors of the Space Elevator Consortium. This one is maybe not quite as good, but it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, this is Dr Greg Haggquist, the owner and inventor of 37.5, and he's going to tell you all about his job and the basis of his technology.
I'm a photophysical chemist, and so that's just somebody that studies light interaction with matter. And so my ability, my training is all in energy capture and energy transfer. And this material or this technology is just that. We capture energy that's released from the body. That's the infrared light that is released by the body, is captured by the particles, and then that energy is transferred into either water molecules that are being released through sweat, and causing diffusion of those water molecules, or it's being used to warm you up, kind of a greenhouse effect, where we capture the energy and then return that energy to us. So the trick, though, is you had to find the right material, and my basics was let's look to nature for inspiration. And I used a volcanic sand, which has a set number of physical properties. But the trick now is, how do I get that volcanic sand into garments or clothing? And you're right that, if I just put a coating on top, it's going to wash out, and that washing out is going to have a negative impact on the environment, coupled with a negative impact on the performance as you use the garment. And so my approach was to incorporate it directly into the fiber. And so during the fiber extrusion process, we're combining this additive, this volcanic sand, into the polymers that are used to make the fabrics. If I just did that without any special trick, nothing actually would happen and nothing would work. And so I needed to come up with a methodology that allowed us to incorporate these particles into polyester through the extrusion, make it durable, and also make it work. And what making it work means is exposing that particle so it's sitting on that surface of the fiber and is exposed to the environment.
So I misactually understood the company at first, I have to admit, and I thought that they made the yarns or threads that were then sold onto the clothing companies. But Dr. Haggquist set me straight.
We're a technology company, and so we're actually not selling anything. We're providing technology to our partners. And so our partners are the one that are supplying the product. So we'll have yarn extruder partners that will make the yarns, and then they will sell them to fabric manufacturers, who will then sell those fabrics to the cut and sew, who then the cut and sew sells the garment to the end brand. And so we're kind of out of all those steps, but we teach each of those partners how to handle our material so they'll maximize the performance, how much material is required. And it really depends on what that outer layer is, how air permeable it is. The more air permeable that outer layer is, will have less impact on the 37.5. The more blocking that outer layer is, the more impact it's going to have on your overall comfort and performance. But it really comes down to 37.5 technology is all about this volcanic sand. And it's how much volcanic sand can I get into each garment. And so I think, when we work with all our partners, we're trying to explain to them, make sure you get enough in each of the garments you make. But we're really not making anything. We're just talking to end brands and saying, hey, would you like to use our technology? This is what it can do for you. And cycling probably is an amazing application of our technology, because you put out so many watts and you need cooling, and you're going uphill where it's slow, where you get really hot, and then you go downhill and then you get a lot of wind and you can get cold. And so if we can control the humidity and minimize the liquid saturation on your garments, we're going to change that comfort and performance for you. And so when you use it, what we're expecting you to say is, yeah, I'm sweating, but I'm not saturating the garment. I'm not free, and then I'm not getting cold when I descend. I'm able to keep performing at a high level because the fabric is moving all that humidity and that moisture out of the system. The thicker the layer or the bigger the thermal barrier, that when you have a thermal barrier, you also have a moisture barrier, because what you're trying to do in a thermal barrier is cut off transport. You want to trap air, and when you trap air, you trap water. So enter 37.5 into a garment that's trying to trap air. We give stepping stones for the water molecules to find their way out of that insulation layer. And so what you end up doing is you trap air, but you move water vapor. And by doing that, you get the warmth without the overheating. And I think that's really important for a performance athlete, is if I'm going to have to put on and take off a jacket because I'm either cold or warm, that's what I would call a disturbance, right? If you're trying to undress yourself while you're riding, that's a difficult task. So if you could just put something on and it recognizes, oh, this person's really heating up, we're going to move all that moisture out and cool you down. Oh, this person's getting cold, I'm going to warm them up now. And that's what this 37.5 technology does. It senses if you're too hot or too cold, and then it makes the adjustment. So you, as a person, don't have to make that physical adjustment of unzipping or taking it off or putting on a garment. And so I think it would be great if we try to find a way to put this into your thermal jersey, because I think you'll find a huge benefit there, especially on cold rides.
A few weeks ago, we had smart bikes. Now we have smart clothing. What are we going to have next month, Lizzy?
Smart cobbles?
Yes, we're going to the cobbles even if the racing isn't. Is that what we're saying?
We're going to go there. We've had one cobbled classic this year. How many more do we need?
So next month, in place of where the cobbled classics would have been, we are still going to do a special episode on cobbled technology.
Absolutely. And to round off this episode, we want to send a really special shout out to Santini and Vermark, and I'm sure others as well out there, who are changing the focus of their companies right now to make and produce face masks for the health services in the various countries, which is really, really cool and deserves a big round of applause.
Yeah, amazing that. If there are any other companies doing amazing things, please let us know if you're listening. We want to shout you out and thank you for what you're doing. All it leaves me to say is thanks, Lizzy. Hopefully we'll be able to see each other face to face at some time in the future. I don't know when that will be, but fingers crossed it'll be sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, but in the meantime, stay at home, save lives, and thanks for listening.
See you later.